country has ever prospered that failed to put its own interests first. We will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism.
New Right Network presents Right Now, the featured podcast of New Right Network. Mobilizing, countering the left, energizing the right. New Right Network, home of the New Right movement.
Hi, I'm Steph Dillon, and joining me today on the New Right Network's Right Now podcast is pioneer of alternative media, Hollywood refugee, Oscar-nominated screenwriter, and PJ Media founder, and author of his latest book, The GOAT, Roger Simon, the legend to all of us.
Right. Well, pleased to be here.
Very good. Thank you. So you went from a Hollywood liberal to, prominent in the conservative movement. And you said that one of the events that completed that transformation for you was 9/11. Can you talk about that? I mean, we have the anniversary coming up, and can you tell us your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I was prepared for 9/11 by earlier events, not earlier Islamic terror events, although there were those. Actually, it was the OJ trial that started my transformation from the left to the right. And because I had been a civil rights worker in the South, where I now live, in the 60s, and to see what was happening in the OJ trial sort of verminated on everything that we had been trying to do by popularizing black racism over white racism, when all racism was terrible. But it didn't finally change my politics until 9/11 happened. And I can remember that morning well, staring at the TV, just waking up in LA, where I then lived, and realizing that everything had changed and that my life had changed. And indeed it had. So that's the starting of Pajamas Media, then PJ Media, which it became, really started then. And my life as a writer changed because I was quite popular in Hollywood until I started Pajamas Media. The Islamic people are not the only ones who don't like apostates.
So you say that your life, watching at that moment, I mean, we all remember that that morning, and just it was so disorienting watching what was happening. And I mean, so what did that, and we all changed to some degree, but your change was action, and why? What did it motivate you to do? I mean,
it was accidental in part. Here's what I mean. After that, my mind had been changed in ways I didn't even realize right away. But also, as a writer, someone who had been writing all his life professionally, I was not good at lying. The truth is, when you write a novel or a movie, if you don't believe what you're writing, it's probably going to be terrible. And there might be some people who can do that, but I don't know them, and I don't even know of them. And I'll tell you, so I started writing what I thought was the truth on a blog very early on, around 02, 03. And I was writing about my political change. And I started the blog to promote a novel that was then coming out from Simon & Schuster. And the novel, I could tell the publishers weren't really happy about it because it had indicated... And I started the blog to promote the novel, which didn't work. The novel tanked. Not the GOAT.
Which one was that?
Novel is not going to tank. It's doing great. But that
which
wasn't
novel was that?
That wasn't it. But people were much more interested in my writing about the political change, because a lot of people who were doing it right then, of course, a lot of them slid back again in around 04. It was a very interesting phenomenon. They reverted to type. But I didn't. Anyway, I mean, it affected my life in a myriad of ways. It got me effectively blackballed in Hollywood, despite being an Academy Award nominee. And it effectively changed my writing, but not not artistically. I mean, my new novel, The Goat, which is now available on Amazon, he said, as in The Goat, the greatest of all time. It's set in the world of tennis and about a guy who's in the 70s fighting Nadal. But I would have maybe written that as a screenplay years ago. Right now, there is movie interest, but I would have written it as a screenplay.
there is?
Now I dread the prejudice of that world against me. And I would have felt like I was swimming uphill, if you know what I'm saying. But also writing something as a novel makes it deeper. I mean, you've got to have a little more to say than a novel or a screenplay, quite frankly. I mean, that's the truth. As someone who's written both, I can say that. On the other hand, writing a good screenplay is a great technical feat and not easy to do.
Well, yeah, and you referred to imparting a bit of wisdom on the people without them knowing it. Is that what The Goat is?
Well, The Goat, I think, might be said to do that. But I mean, you have to be really good to do that, because you have to be, and also you have to develop an audience. And that's become very difficult in this day and age, because our country has become so bifurcated that your audience is on one side or the other. Now, I'd love to have people who claim to be liberal or whatever, progressive or whatever name they want to use, read my books. And a few do, probably, but not very many. I mean, and this book is not overtly political, because it's about issues of life and death that are bigger than that, really. I mean, liberals and conservatives, I have news for them, are all going to die. And they have to think about it. So, that's what this book is about, even though it's quite funny and, and hopefully very entertaining. It's dealing with those kind of issues. So you would think that would be able to cross lines. I don't know. I mean,
maybe it will.
Maybe it will, but it's very hard to. It's not so much what a person would think reading a book. It's actually getting messages across lines. Like you have a new Republican conservative network here. Now, who's going to watch this? Are any liberals going to watch it? Unlikely. I mean, it would be interesting. It would be great to hear their reactions. It would be great to talk to them. I'll tell you an interesting story. When we started Pajamas Media back in 2003 or so, we started putting it together. The original intention was to have people on both sides debating in a collegial manner. It fell apart within a year or two because the liberals demanded more money than we were paying the conservatives. And we couldn't do that. So that's it. I mean, they were, who knows what, Juan Williams gets paid by Fox to be their House liberal. Oh,
yeah, maybe. Yeah, I can see that.
He probably is in a good position to negotiate.
Yeah, exactly. I can't believe they hired Donna Brazil after she lied like that, gave Hillary the debate questions and then lied about it. I couldn't believe that.
That's an interesting story, I bet. I mean, after she publicly lied in CNN, obviously, they couldn't really easily hire her without taking a lot of income. And they've done equivalent, but they probably had second thoughts. And whereas Fox thought they could get away with it, and there she was, a very well-known liberal figure they could hire. I mean, the whole thing is awfully cynical and terrible, I think.
Yeah, it's awful. It's terrible. You've written a lot of books. I haven't read the detective series, but I'm going to now that I've gotten into this one, because I've always seen you as PJ Media. Sure. So it's always been right. And so and this isn't like that, right? This is a story. It's entertaining, but and I suspect the detective ones are too. So I'll be looking into those. I didn't even know that you had that series.
Well, yeah. One of them was made into a very successful movie with Richard Dreyfuss called The Big Fix. And
yeah.
But that's like before your time. it's still, you can still read it, see it on Netflix, etc. But it's not a bad film. It sort of stands up. But I was fairly on the left in those days, and I had become a hero to the left because of the early Moses Wine detective stories. So I was even more of an apostate and created more problems for myself because of this.
Oh, interesting.
I don't disavow what I wrote then. I thought it was me then. In fact, it's very easy to find anything I wrote on Amazon. So it's not for me to say I disavow it is stupid. It's not. I mean, that's where I was at then, and people change over time. In fact, people who don't change are the ones who I find spooky. Like Bernie Sanders probably hasn't changed single thing he thought since the age of 14. And he's now what, 78? Or 7. So he's like, hardening of the arteries in the extreme. Are you hearing me? Do you lose me?
Right, the point of life. Yeah, I did a little bit, but we'll keep going. But I mean, over life, that is the purpose for all of us, right? Is to grow, to change, to learn, and to become, and to evolve.
Let's hope.
I was talking with someone the other day who was writing about the kids on the university campuses now, and they have this ideal that this university is not going to change them. They're not going, that this experience is, they're going to come out as who they came in as. And there's no room for growth in that, right? Because you're going there supposedly to learn and be exposed and to, and yes, to become different, but there's no tolerance anymore.
No, university today is an indoctrination center.
Yeah, but there's no tolerance for humanity. We're not allowed to be people.
Sorry.
I saw a critique.
But you're fighting back right now, so that's good.
Yeah, I saw a liberal critiquing a movie on Twitter the other day, and I don't know, a joke. It was the Joker movie, which I haven't seen, but she's saying, "I'm not interested in feeling bad for this downtrodden guy who." Right? It's like, but humans are multi-dimensional. It's not just, oh, you're 100% bad, you're 100% good. Like, all of us are all of those things, and and the stories and the movies and the art and the entertainment is how we process that and how we move through that and how we share that and how we impact the world with that. And so much of that is lost in both the production of art. I think now movies stink. They really do. Most of them, they're not worth going to see. There's nothing really that moves people like things used to do.
I completely agree. And part of the fault, though, is conservative financiers who have left the arts alone and given it to the other side. The only thing they'll invest in is the Philharmonic, but Beethoven doesn't need help at this point.
Yeah, right.
So,
right.
So that's why it's a little bit the fault of the right that they've ceded the field, and it's really stupid.
On everything. Well, it is because like like Andrew Breitbart said, and everybody knows, is that the politics comes from the culture, and
right.
and the conservatives. But the conservatives have done that with everything. They've done it with the arts. They've done it with education.
Yeah.
They've done. And they're working on doing it in technology, where they're just walking off the field, right? And they claim like it's the moral high ground, free market. Yeah, they're free to kick us out of the market. That's some freedom.
Well, keep plugging.
So
I hope your listeners read The Goat, because they should be supporting conservative artists.
And it's art in general. I'm going to be sending it. Like, I think I could send it to probably 5 liberal people and family members that I know, and they wouldn't know, like,
Yeah.
right? Because most people are not so engrossed in politics. They would just read it like it's a great book,
Yep.
right? And it really, and so far it really is. So you're getting a lot of the media is open to you on this book. They are having you on to talk about it.
The conservative media,
Oh,
the liberal media, complete silence. In fact, that happened to me. I'm used to that because I wrote 2 nonfiction. Every one of my novels previous to changing politically got a favorable review from the New York Times. Every single one. That's 10 books. When I started to write as a conservative, they didn't even review it. Silence.
that's it. And this one too. Even this one's, you know.
I'm a person to them.
Wow, that's amazing.
So
That's amazing. I hope conservative media can beat them down. What do you think? How has the success of the alternative media movement been?
Well, I think it's been fairly good in that a number of people are paying attention to it. And I think without it, we'd really be in trouble. So, you know, I mean, I have sites I prefer over others, but that's normal. And you know, I welcome everyone like you who's trying to do it. I mean, that's the only way to succeed is to try. And also, there's a huge audience. Look, Donald Trump got elected.
Yes, he did. He
So
got elected.
I mean, that's one of the absolutely crazy things about conservatives not investing in films. They've got a built-in audience that's gigantic.
Yeah, and nobody and people don't go to movies anymore because like, every time you go, it's like this giant punch in the face to everything that you believe, right? And
Either that or
that's
so
not
stupid, it's not worth going anyway.
yeah,
One or the
yeah,
other.
yeah,
So,
exactly. So so your character in The Goat, Dan Gelber, he calls his writing, the writing that he's done throughout, he sounds a lot like you, this character. He says his writing, a need to communicate to prove to the world his life was of some consequence.
I think that's, you know, I think that's true of every writer who ever lives, frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, why do we do it? I don't know. I mean, you want to pretend to yourself that you're doing good to the world and influencing people in a positive way. But I think one of the things you're really doing is showing off. You know, but you know, thank God for that though, because you know we have Shakespeare because he showed off.
Yeah.
I mean, he had a
People
right.
say that, like,
I mean, he's a little bit better than the rest of us. However, he was a
yeah.
show off, and you know his writing was quite conservative if you look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, all those comedies about love conquering all, and you know, and the tragedies about, you know, if you look at them, they track out as really being conservative stories. It's kind of interesting, as do a lot of the great novels that people regard as classics.
Yeah. I'm not sure what was wrong with my education when I was younger, but I only recently in the past 5 years or so started like reading, and maybe it's a frame of mind change that as you get older, you're more, you know, it's not a reading assignment, like you're reading because you want to absorb what it is you're reading. So I've been reading some of these things, and it's so different from everything that's done today. I mean, even last year I finished like Crime and Punishment. I mean, and that is like, you know, like the longest way to tell a story. You know, like you said, when you wrote your you know, like the I know best. I said, oh, that's a departure, and you said, well, you can tell it a lot. It's more efficient right? To get your thoughts down on paper, because these long stories, they stay with you, right? They have an impact on you and the characters. And so what would you recommend? Some of the literature, what do you recommend for people to read?
I've never answered that question exactly because I don't like to tell people what to read, but, obviously read the classics. The Russian novels are the best things ever written for novels, I think. But if you haven't read them, read them. Some are a little bit long.
You really will.
But, some are. I just recently read Tolstoy's Death of Ivan Ilyich, which is only about 120 pages or something.
Oh, really?
And if you haven't read Tolstoy, that's a good introduction. I mean, there's a reason he's so famous. Right?
Yep. Okay.
And when I was a kid, I used to devour Balzac. And now Balzac, and because he knows society and the jealousy of people better than anybody.
You've been listening to New Right Network, mobilizing, countering, energizing. Online at newrightnetwork.com.